Let's talk about risk appetite, defined as the amount of risk an organization is willing to take in pursuit of its objectives. Now, is there such a thing as an amount of risk that an organization is willing to take? I'm not sure that you can actually define an amount of risk, especially not without consideration of the need to take risk in order to achieve objectives because of the reward. And also recognizing that risk has both positive and negative potential effects on the organization. But so let's leave that aside for a minute and talk about why do we even worry about risk? Well, certainly there are some sources of risk, like an earthquake, fire like in Maui, that you need to understand because you want to avoid being severely affected by such a thing, such that it really destroys your ability to achieve your objectives, significantly impairs it perhaps. So there are some sources of risk because of their total effect that you want to identify and you want to mitigate, you want to manage in some fashion. Is there a particular amount of risk related to that? I don't know. I'll leave that for another discussion. But the other reason that we want to understand risk is in the context of making the decisions necessary to run the organization and achieve our objectives, to run the organization day to day, both tactically and strategically, making decisions at all levels of the organization. And as a result, taking risk. But we need to do that with an understanding of what is the right level or the right risk to take to achieve those objectives. Now, does a risk appetite statement help with those decisions? I don't know. If you look at the risk appetite statements that are out there for public view, including those that have been suggested by the COSO organization as examples in their guidance, you get things like, we have no appetite for compliance risk. We have no appetite for safety risk. We have moderate appetite when it comes to credit granted to our customers. Now, what does that actually mean? How can you actually have no appetite for compliance risk or safety risk and still run an organization? You can't reduce that level of risk to absolutely zero. You can bring it down quite a lot, but can you bring it down to zero? No, you can't. The only way to avoid entirely the risk of employee or contractor safety and harm is by exiting the business or not getting in the business in the first place. The only way to avoid entirely any possibility of a compliance failure is to not be in the business where there's applicable regulations or likely to be regulations in the future, because some of these situations are subject to sort of retroactive look back in regulation, not only in the United States and other countries as well. So the idea of a zero tolerance or zero appetite for any particular risk doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and it also doesn't help the people who are trying to decide what to do about risk. So, for example, if you're the manager of an oil refinery or a manufacturing facility, and you have a need to, according to your safety manager or your operations manager, to improve investments in safety, how much money should you spend to do that? Especially if you've only got so much money in the budget. You're not going to get any more. And you've got a choice between the safety of employees and compliance with regulations, or satisfying a customer, paying employees, cash flow, inventory management. You've got all of these competing demands. So how do you decide how much to spend? Well, I'm not sure that a high-level risk appetite statement works, but you certainly can have guidance in terms of being able to assess within the constraints and objectives of running the business, which is the best investment. Which is the best investment when it comes to safety, compliance, inventory management, new product development, and all the rest of this. But so there can be risk limits. So for example, it makes an awful lot of sense to have risk limits over how much credit you grant to new customers. Now, if you're a credit manager, are you looking at a risk appetite statement that is all the way up there? No, you need to have practical day-to-day guidance with the opportunity, the ability to go to higher level of management when there's a clear business case to exceed those credit limits, or that policy on credit limits. So I think there's a need to provide guidance. I'm just not sure that a high level risk appetite statement makes any sense at all. I really don't. I don't think you can have an amount of risk you're willing to take, especially since potential rewards and risk is changing all the time. What I suggest, instead of seeking an amount of risk, is for management with the assistance of the risk practitioner, think about how they are going to guide decisions when it comes to taking risk, especially taking risk relative to opportunities. There needs to be a return on investment for every investment, whether that be in cybersecurity or compliance, marketing, new product development, and acquisition. All of those come with both upside and downside, which need to be compared. And it's not necessarily easy to define for every situation a strict policy as to what you can and can't do. There may be some guidance that you want to set in terms of don't go beyond this, don't go beyond that. Make sure there is at least this level of return on investment. Make sure that you have considered all the downside risks as well as being realistic about the upside opportunities. So I don't like these risk appetite statements because I don't think that they are guiding individual decisions. I think that we need to train people and provide them with guidance as to how to make decisions that are informed, made intelligently with good information, using the information and support and analysis of all the related people, and make the right decision to take the right level of the right risk to achieve objectives. This is what I've written about in my books many, many times, that rather than taking the right level of the right risk in terms of risk appetite statement, we need to be looking to how can we best achieve our objectives. And let's make sure that there's an acceptable likelihood of achieving each objectives. In order to do that, we need to understand where we are today relative to where we want to be. Then we need to understand what lies ahead, what is likely to happen, both good and bad, and project forward the likelihood of achieving that objective. And that means that given where we are today, considering all the risks and opportunities, are we at an acceptable level of likelihood of achieving that objective? If not, then we need to do something, either minimize risk or maximize opportunities. This is, I think, a better way to integrate risk management and the consideration of risk into decision making and the management of the organization for success, whether by the CEO and the executive suite or through actions led by the board. Risk appetite statement, it doesn't really work. I mean, how many of us have a risk appetite statement in our personal lives? How many people have a risk appetite statement when it comes to crossing the road or driving to work? And frankly, how many of us think that the CEO in his decision making is guided by a risk appetite statement? I really don't think so. I mean, there may be some ideas about risk attitude in terms of we really want to stress not taking this risk, even if there is this opportunity. But I'm not sure I want to put a number on it, and I'm not even sure that number makes any sense. So I urge each one of you to think about what makes sense for the business, what makes sense in terms of helping the organization take the right risks, make the right intelligent and informed decisions for success, achieving objectives. I don't think the risk appetite does that. I welcome your thoughts. Maybe you think I'm wrong. Maybe you've got some great examples of how a risk appetite statement is helping the plant manager, the marketing manager, the human resources vice president make decisions. If you like this idea, if you feel challenged by it, please consider subscribing to this channel and also to my blog at normanmarks.wordpress.com. Thank you.